Yeah, that's a much smarter thing.
Yeah, I'm back in my living room.
You're
I left
back.
beautiful Washington behind.
Oh,
I know. I had a really great time, though. It was a really nice vacation.
you could tell. Yeah.
I have a niece that I used to always call, she and a great niece, the littles, and she said, or the short people. And I said, she said, why did you call us that? And I said, because you're taller than me now, and I knew that would happen someday. Oh, there's
Nope.
Gigi in her
Right, right.
drive-by. The cats are happy I'm home. I got home last night.
Apparently so. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. This is WGSN-DB going solo radio, number one TV and talk network solo radio and TV. Thank you,
that's it.
Susie.
Yes.
I think I know it by heart, and then she takes it away, and then all of a sudden I don't know it by heart. This
I'm not
is
even
let's
touching it. You're better than me.
this is Let's Talk About Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine. Good to have you back.
So
At least back
today
home.
we're going to talk about on a first date, the questions to ask and not ask.
To ask.
I know. And I was thinking this is really fun because we know the ones that we like being asked and not asked. And boy, we've heard from our clients all the same, the things they like
Oh,
being
yeah.
asked and not asked, huh?
Well, the thing for me is also, I was already thinking about this before the show. Two things that I definitely want to talk about. One is also the questions hopefully you cover in the conversation before you go on your first date. So those are out of the way. And secondly, just speaking for myself, I don't date the way normal people do in terms of conversations I have. On the first date, I like going way deeper than most people do. So I have to rein back in my suggestions to be more normal for other people.
Oh, what fun is it to be normal, huh? But it is
No,
really funny how much you and I relish in our lives because of what we do and the work that we've done to get to here. Deep is better, which is what I love about hanging out with my family because we go so deep. The conversations we have, I'm thinking, I bet most families do not have this conversation. It's so enriching and fun.
yeah,
And
mine doesn't. I feel left out.
yeah, I bet because it doesn't happen with too many people.
Right.
And the thing is, too, I think what's helpful in those pre-conversations that you just mentioned, if you're starting to have a little texting or emailing, and then you actually talk on the phone or video somehow, FaceTime or Skype or Zoom, to get some of the basic stuff out of the way, and then have a little test drive to see, are they comfortable having a little bit less than surface conversation about like, what's your sign and what's the latest movie you saw, which is an
Right.
okay thing to ask. But for you and I, it's not enough. And it would never be enough to take us to a second meeting, I don't think. I want
No.
somebody who is introspective, and I want to show them that I'm introspective, and that what work have you done personally to get to this part of the journey, and what have been your responsibilities of the things that have happened in your past relationships, and how do you ask those questions without feeling like you're going to alienate them and have them rush out of the restaurant in 2 seconds flat.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. It's almost in a way a good thing. Someone to ask those questions because you may scare the people away who you don't want to be around anyway.
Yeah,
So there is that side of it. But the other thing is, what I love, can someone else be the innocent question you ask? Because when you ask the innocent question and then they may not answer with the depth that you're looking for, you start to take it deeper. Because, for example, like saying, what was the last movie you saw? And what do you think of it? And they say, oh, I saw this movie and it was really good. Then it's like, well, what about it made you, excited? What about you gave you that thought? Because some movies I do a lot of science fiction movies and shows and stuff because I'm fascinated by what if conversations. So anything about what if I can talk about for hours. So that's a good springboard for me. But again, I'm different. But if you go to see a romance movie, well, did that inspire you? Did that make you wonder about what you could have? Did you feel sad because you didn't have it already? There's so many questions you could spin off of that simple thing about what movie you saw.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily bad to have those things, but it's what do you do with the information?
Right.
How do you go deeper and have more of an enriching conversation?
Right. So then, as you said, you start out with this thing that seems kind of benign and kind of surface, and then you test. Can you ask a deeper question? And maybe they can't answer it. Maybe they haven't ever thought about it. Or even for me, which is fine, is they'll go, wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. Wow, I've never thought of it that way. I'm like, okay, I'll wait. Think. Tell me what you thought. If you haven't thought about it ahead of time, that's okay too.
Yeah.
And that you're willing to think is so cool, because that's what I want. I want somebody that's, if they haven't already exercised that muscle of going deeper, that they're like, I could do that. I mean, my late husband, he'd been married twice before, and he kept saying, I've never been asked these kind of questions before. And often what he would do is he said, I just can't right now. But every time, the next time we saw each other, he'd come back with his thoughts about it. He'd been thinking about it. It was important to him to answer him. Oh my gosh. I mean, that just kept making me going, okay, I want to see him again, because I like this trait a lot.
In fact, that's also, I would say, something to plant in the seeds is also on your first date, especially if it's a date you're enjoying, is you're going to have questions that you ask that are seeds being planted for the next time. Because that's the other part too, is that, I mean, transparency, I went out with somebody recently, not through the dating apps, we went through a business group, but it bodes well for the future, I'll say that. We had a really wonderful conversation. It was a very rich conversation, very deep. But also, I realized after I left and after we hugged and departed from each other, I realized several things we talked about, we didn't finish. We just got started. And so the questions that we're asking, because the thing is, it's this multi-threaded thing that happens. You ask a question, and you go somewhere else, and you go somewhere else. And the answer to the first question never got handled. And so it's like, this is going to be cool.
Leave me wanting more. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that reflection is really important too, because you should have your own personal debriefing, or with your colleague or your best friend, about, gosh, I really want to talk about this person that I met and this conversation we had. And then the more you talk about them, are like, oh, I like this about them. And wow, we didn't discuss that, but we did discuss this. And it was so intriguing. And they had a thought about it in a way I hadn't really thought about it that way before. Or it sparked me to say that. And it helps to just remind you of what it felt like then, and that what you want now to do next when you're with them. Isn't that the best? Those are the dates that it's an hour and it feels like 5 minutes. Those are my favorite.
Well, it's actually when it's like 3 hours and you thought it was on half an hour, because I don't know if you've done that one. It's
just
like, oh dear.
I know. I've been on the phone a couple times with men, and they're like, I've never been on the phone this long before, but it was fun and it was interesting. So what a nice compliment. And I felt the same way, that we just had, as you said, you just keep branching off and going on to other subjects. And it's really fascinating and the best. It's really the best.
Yeah, it is. And that's the enriching piece. And for me, it's like, otherwise, why would it bother? Well, first of all, why would it bother going on a date, which is intended towards a romantic, ideally relationship, even if it doesn't work out, without being fully in to discuss and converse and have questions that invoke different responses? Because as you said, asking about the weather, or what they do for food is like, so what?
Yeah.
But if they love being in the kitchen cooking, what do you love making? Oh, let's talk.
Yeah.
Maybe some common ground.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of stuff we talk about has opportunities to go way deeper. So in terms of the questions to ask and not to ask, we're definitely going to get some specifics along the way, especially the ones you may not want to ask on the first date. We'll get to that as well, because that's going to be fun. But also the recognition that almost anything you talk about has branches or like stems to lead into new things that could be much deeper as well. So don't dismiss certain topics as being simple, because the truth is that almost anything you talk about can be taken way deeper if you choose to do so. So have fun with it.
And it's funny you bring up the food thing, because I was having a conversation recently with a man, and we were talking about the kind of things we like to cook. And I said, and my favorite thing is to have pauses. Somehow there's something that has to simmer, and that you dance. You dance together in the kitchen while you're cooking. And so he says, oh, we should come up with recipes. And then here's the break. While it's simmering, we'll suggest a song, because we know this song is for the amount of time for the simmering. We had the most fun with that conversation. Isn't that a fun conversation?
Yep.
And it all started with, what do you like to eat and what do you like to cook? And it just went.
See? Right there.
I know. Super fun. See, it even makes you laugh. It was a very fun conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
That's the thing. I mean, food has become one of the, maybe because of the pandemic. Actually, no, I'm sure it's because of the pandemic, because of more time at home and also not going to the store as much initially. So I wasn't like, go buy anything you wanted. So I decided somewhere along the way, not even consciously, to start doing more creative things at home because making the same old thing was getting kind of boring.
Yeah.
And so I've been looking at finding new recipes and and I've got my condiment and sauce array has expanded dramatically.
Wow.
You know, and like even last night, I mean, the first thing, I mean, this sounds so simplistic, but one thing is I have some online subscriptions I have that provide links to recipes and things. So I've got a catalog now, my bookmarks on my computer, which I've then chosen the ones I really like to put onto my phone to like as recipes that I want to use that like in the next couple of weeks. And it's now becoming, I would say the boundaries to my mastery are getting less and less thick. Like I'm discovering with the idea of cooking and the idea of like having, again, someone to cook with, that you're saying, where you get to have things that you can play in between certain steps. That's on my list of things I want to have in a relationship. Absolutely. So yeah, that's a good one. So question to ask could be, do you enjoy being in the kitchen? Do you like to dance?
Yes.
You know?
Wouldn't that be fun? It certainly would be fun for me. I've certainly done it in the past and would love to do it again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly, I think one of the basic things that you and I talk about a lot is where you could start is, what do you want to learn about this person? What are some really core key things? And then what are some really core key things that you want to make sure you tell them about you? Because you don't want to keep going out with somebody if you find out you have some really core things that are completely different. What's the point?
Right.
But how do you get to that? First, you make a list. I think making a list is a really good idea. Not that you get out a checklist and put it on the table and make marks and stuff. I think that would be terrible. I've heard rumors that happens, but
yeah, I mean, it could be kind of fun.
You could say it was a game. Well, and when I was dating before I met my late husband, I used to have this calendar that was a question a day for 365 days. And I'd save some of them that were really kind of provocative and thought-provoking. And I'd stick them in my purse. And if there was a lull, I go, I have this calendar and here's this question. And what do you think of it? And they were really not ever put off. They thought, wow, yeah, that is a really intriguing question. And what was really fascinating is I got such a variety of answers.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always the same answer, which was even more fun. So you don't have to think of all the questions yourself. There's like the questions to ask on a first date. We're going to give you some guidelines because there's some out there that are terrible, but you don't have to think it all up. But you need to find out if they're your person to go out with a second time. That's the goal. That's really the goal.
Yeah. Because you want to know what their values are. It's probably one of the biggest things you don't necessarily see from someone's dating profile. No. And the other thing is also, a lot of people, I mean, I'm on the dating apps, being single, I check out the apps. I notice the variety and the amount of each profile's content varies dramatically, not just the pictures, but what they write. And so there's things that this person hasn't said that basically I need to know pretty early, otherwise they're not going to go somewhere. Like, for example, their political views or their vaccination choice or their religious views. Obviously, height and weight are basically going to find out when you meet them anyway. But there's certain things about them that if they don't put in the dating profile, those questions want to be pretty much up front. Ideally, actually, on the phone call before you meet in person again, because when you're physically committing to be on the first date, you've hopefully taken some preliminary steps before you get there, which have eliminated some of the red flags and deal breakers you may have thought about beforehand. So ideally, when it's the first date, you've cleared a lot of the barriers to being there in the first place, which is great. But then the conversation can be much more of I would say maybe the alignment questions, probably the best way of putting it. Those questions that you discover is like, is this person aligned to my values? Is this person aligned to my choices? Does this person respect who I'm going to be, what I'm working on, and my projects, what things are? Those things are key questions you don't get from dating profile, but thankfully when you meet somebody, when you feel that sense, we talked about before, masculine and feminine, about how a woman wants to feel safe and a man wants to feel respected, a kind of these foundational qualities that we carry amongst others. And so to communicate that in a way, not saying I will do this for you, but it's noticing how they respond to your questions or to when you share something. If you feel that from them, that's innately who they are. That's awesome. That's like thumbs up all the way.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question, because one of your big things you've talked about a lot is that they need to have traveled before they met you. So what do you ask them to get to that answer?
It could be as simple as saying,
ask them.
It can be on the first date, no argument. It can also be on the phone calls before, because talking about who we are and backgrounds. I mean, for me, it's easy because when they hear my accent, they go, "You're not from around here." So I can say, "Yes, I lived somewhere else," which leads into, "Have you lived somewhere else? Have you traveled somewhere else?" So I have a kind of an easy one with that one, because people generally would question my accent, where it's from. So that's an easy one for me to go counterpoint, like switch it around. It's like, okay, now you want to answer your question. Do you have a passport? Have you traveled? Where do you want to go? Even because they may not have traveled, but do you have a passport that you can travel on, and where do you want to go? Just so I can maybe have some seeds planted for myself, going, is that where I want to go?
Have I always wanted to go there?
Exactly. So that's the way I would do it.
Well, good, because it's such a big thing to you, and I've never asked you how you get to it.
It's actually very easy, frankly, for me. That's again biased. But then for another one example, and I'll speak to this one, is because also one of my primary values or key qualities is someone who's done some personal development work, because I've been in the personal development field for years. And so, like the woman I had coffee with the other day, and it was a pre-date, the way I talk about doing with my clients. So I did it with her. Is our conversation was a lot about our development journeys, what we've been through and growing through, not necessarily the programs and courses, but who we've become and what we've learned.
Yeah.
And that was extremely rewarding on both sides. In fact, what drew us closer together, because there was a level of, oh, you've learned this. Oh, you've grown through that. Oh, you've healed that. Oh, you're this. It's like those things for me. Again, not everybody. I'm unique differently that way. But I felt a value and common values.
Yeah.
And that was something I really enjoyed.
See, good point. And so some of what happens for me a lot is I'm a widow, and people's reactions and responses are all over the board about that. And so if they don't first, which it sort of feels like the elephant in the room to them, not to me, I'll bring it up and talk about what I've learned and what I gained and what was the hard part and why it was hard, and whoa, how different it is to have really experienced it, even though I had, thought I was being this empathetic person. I read a quote the other day from a therapist who had coached lots of people who had lost loved ones and spouses, and she finally did and went, I should go back and apologize to everybody because I really didn't know what I was doing. And that's not really the truth if you've had some training, but you really don't understand if you haven't been through it. So once I bring it up, and then it's an interesting thing to talk about what my journey's been like, and then what things have been hard for you in your life, so it's not like I'm just saying, what hard things have you had happen, and what did you do about it, and how grown are you inside, and have you done internal work, that I've shared mine so that it gives them permission. And it's interesting, the people who want to skim over it because it's too scary, or they haven't done any work, so they don't even know what in the heck I'm talking about. So it gets to the bottom line really fast with just sharing my story, which is kind of fascinating. I never thought it would do it that way, but it is a fail-safe.
That's the thing, is in a lot of ways, I mean, I guess to summarize them, what we've both been sharing is really got to start where you are. And also not hide yourself because of something that's different about you. Like, your experience and my experience are very different, but they don't make us feel ashamed or anything. In fact, if anything, they give us a sense of more room to play and more opportunity to speak about it. So that's the thing for anybody watching this. You have something too. I'm sure you have whatever that is, whether it's qualities, experiences, perspectives that you have from your own life that maybe make you unique. Don't hide those.
Yeah. Be proud.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, one of the things about having somebody die suddenly in your life, you go, I am going to just take every day as grateful. Every day is special. I mean, I went riding this morning, another reason for the hat. And Donna, who's 9 years older than me, every time we see each other, isn't this beautiful? We're so lucky we get to do this. And it just keeps that momentum for the day. So I think if you can figure out how to have your life feel like that the majority of the time, it's major drugs that have all the time, so I wouldn't recommend that. It brings that kind of energy to the date where you can still talk about hard things, challenging things, and how you've overcome it without bringing the room down, because that's the other thing.
Right.
Really watch the kind of questions you're going to ask or answer that everybody goes, oh, really? Wow, kind of depressing.
Absolutely.
I don't think we can get happy again.
Well, because one of the things, for example, one of the questions not to ask is, like, could be because you don't know unless you know the context about the relationship with their ex, for example.
Yeah.
The thing is, it could be spun the other way around. It's like, yeah, what did you learn from your past relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's a different direction you're taking them in. Because you can say, what was this, because most people tend to go into most people. Some people go into the suffering of their last breakup and how it's wounded them, and they feel like dishonored and betrayed and everything else. Well, the thing is, what did you actually learn from that? Because that's where you are now and who you are now. And I need to know, if I'm on a date with you, what I'm dealing with.
Really?
So the lessons, the learnings, where who you've become since that event, whatever the event was, no matter how catastrophic it was. Like you were saying, being a widow. Yes, I know how it can be. Like the sense. I mean, a long time. One of my way previous relationships was with a widow. Her husband had committed suicide. She was okay with it, but it was 5 years after he passed away when we got together, and we both been through the same master's program, so we had some common values. But she'd done a lot of work as well, and her kids actually done a lot of work as well. I mean, they were pre-teens at the time. But that sense of being able to just be real with them versus going, there's a weight sitting out there, or something I need to sort of avoid. Because the thing that happens when you have someone who's been widowed, there can, for the other person, can be this unspoken like entity like it's out there, some feeling of like, I don't want to cross that path or step in that place because it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. So the more that you've done the work which you have to heal, that makes you more amenable and approachable. It's like, so that happened, okay, which is so different from a lot of people. Some people, I mean, just in breakups, not even widows, but breakups and divorces, they carry around so much pain and vitriol they haven't healed yet. It's hard to date beyond that. Yeah. That's a hint, by the way. Anybody watching this is feeling that, get some help before you date anybody.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's such a good point, because I generally don't ask on the first date about an ex. I do, though, especially when they know what the heck I do, that I say, this is what I've learned from my past relationships, whatever those relationships happen to be. And I don't go into great detail unless they ask. This is what I learned about me. And so tell me what you think, what's happened with you. What have you learned with each of your past relationships? And what I'm listening to is, if they don't keep switching it to what crappy people the other person was, that it was all the other person's fault. So I don't say, how many times have you had a relationship and how long have they lasted? I mean, eventually I'll ask that, and often they'll tell, but that's not what I want to hear in the beginning. I want to hear, how much personal responsibility are you taking when it comes up as a subject? So all across the board, what do you do for work? What was your favorite job when you were growing up? Is there something you'd really like to do in the future? I'm also listening to the underlying, did you grow about it? All the bosses always hated. I went out with somebody that said that. Every boss has hated me. Really? I'm really, everyone? I don't think you're my person, really, because, oh my, if that's really the truth, your energy is really bad, but it's not usually that. They take things personally, or they go against them, and of course they're mad at them because they're the boss, for God's sake. If you don't want to mind the boss, then you leave and go to another job. But so I tell people, when I'm asking, I don't tell the people across the table, but I tell my clients, and I tell here, when I'm asking a question, I'm listening for that answer, but the underlying answers always. And it's amazing because it makes it a more interesting conversation, because then I learn how perfected I'm getting at asking those kind of questions for the things that I want to learn. So I want to learn, do they have longtime friends? That's a really important thing to me, because generally grumpy, grouchy, negative people don't have a lot of longtime friends. They give up, or they go away, or they whatever. So that's really important to me. And then, do you ever talk to them? What do you talk about? Do you do things with them? Because I like doing stuff with my friends, and I want somebody who has friends that I can go be friends with them, and they can go be friends with mine. So I ask them those kinds of questions because that's really important to me. So when you have this list of what's important to you, then you figure out how to ask it so that you get the answer without, well, how many friends do you have? And That just feels so invasive.
Oh yeah,
I'm not being nosy. I'm being inquisitive. I'm being curious. That's really my intention.
absolutely. That there's something about that you said that just hit me, was about the is that when you're asking, when we're not, certainly it's true for me too, when I'm asking questions of the other person, I don't really care so much about the specifics as much as I do care about how they responded to them, how they learned from them. Because the other part also, as you said, and I'm going to put this word on top of it, is that if somebody, speaking about the past relationships, sits in the role of the victim all the time, which has happened before in past dates, it's almost impossible for me to sit there and say, okay, date or client?
Oh, yes.
Which is the other
Oh,
challenge
yes.
for you too. It's like one of the challenges we both have, I'm sure, because we do know so much about the dating conversation, relationship conversation, that I want to meet somebody who does not even tempt me to think of them as a possible client.
Oh, that's a wonderful goal.
Yeah. Now, of course, again, that's unique for us. People watching this may not have the same thing as that. But truth is, on some level, definitely when you're asking questions and what you want to know about somebody is, do they stand on their own 2 feet? And do they have a sense of ownership, as you said earlier, that what happened, and they can really step forward themselves and they're not dragging everything with them into the present.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yes. And you get, either the little peak of their baggage from the past or the whole thing just comes tumbling down. And
yep.
Yeah, it's amazing how much people will share if you just ask a pretty benign sounding question. So we'll come back and after the break and talk about some really specific questions you can ask and the ones you don't want to ask.
Indeed, we will. See you in a minute.
We'll be right back.
And we're back.
And we're back with Let's Talk About Dating with Christine and Barry. And today we're talking about on a first date, what questions to ask and not ask. And we've talked about before the break how to get a sense of the other person and to get some ways of getting broader answers and broader feelings about them. But we'll give you some specifics, if you want to make a list of questions to ask and not ask, because boy, we've had the gamut, I'm sure, because both of us have dated for a very long time over our history of on this earth. I know. But, it gives us lots of fodder for what we do for a living, right? That's what I said. I said,
it's research for our show.
It's not just my life, but it's research for everybody else. I'm taking one for the team, right?
There you go. So, one suggestion off the top of my head to really talk about is when you're dating somebody, it doesn't matter what age they are as well. This is for anybody who's asking, is like, where do you see yourself in your next creation, whatever that is? Not necessarily in 5 years or 10 years. That's always a fixed thing. But where do you see yourself in your vocation or in your life and what you want to do? Like, what is it? It's like I like saying to people, even when they're in their 40s and 50s, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
Because it's always fun to ask. Because one, it's like they put them on their back, going, what do you mean when I grow up? It's like, because the thing is, do we ever grow up? But the second part is, are you living what you want to be living? Are you just doing a job, or are you just doing a thing that isn't really what you joyfully want to do? And if not, what do you want to do? Because that could open a whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I used to get really stumped by that question and I had all these friends that would make, 2-year plans and 5-year plans, and things would happen because they wrote them down. And I was like, I don't get that, because the way I was raised, it was like barely 2 weeks. And what somebody suggested for me that really works for me is, how do I want to feel next year this time? How do I want to feel in 5 years this time? That really spoke to the F of the Myers-Briggs in me, because I am such an F. That really works. And so I'll ask that question of somebody and they'll go, well, nobody's ever asked me that. And I'll go, well, you can tell me where you'd like to be, living or job or any of that. And then tell me how you'd feel about it. Because most people really want to do the job description thing, which I don't find any fault with. It just doesn't work for me.
Right.
So that leads to a kind of an interesting conversation too, because nobody asked that. Maybe somebody will ask it now that they've heard it, but nobody ever had before I started doing, because they all went, really? Interesting question.
And that's the thing is, it's think about the questions you want to ask, because some of this stuff we do is so, like, I got my checklist I always use. I got memorized 15 questions you always ask. Do they really work for you? So maybe you want to ask questions that are much more fresh and evocative, that do create an open-ended answer. That's the other part. You really want to ask questions that are not yes/no answers and not succinct, but have an opening to more. Because the thing is, if you ask a question about something that ideally leads to 2 other questions and 4 other questions and 8 other questions, you've got a great conversation to have. And that's fun to do, especially when it's something positive, additive, and directional. Yeah. So that's one thing that's focused on. So all the questions I'm talking about asking will be in that bucket. The ones not to ask, generally the ones that are finite or digging in the dirt, to be polite, or that are very limited. You want to have them be so much more additive questions.
Yeah, a really broad, like when you were talking about, do you have a passport, and how many stamps does it have in it, and what stamps would you like to add? Because it's funny, I was places where they didn't. I go, I want stamps in my especially when I got a new one. After I got married, I had to change it because I changed my name. I want stamps in this one because I don't have a Brett. Oh my goodness, Barry left. Where did he go? Barry, please come back. So I guess I'll talk about questions to ask and not ask. So one of the questions I got asked on a date that I didn't like was, why have you been single for so long? What's wrong? So it's like, is it what's wrong with me, or is it what's wrong with the guys? It was really annoying, and I didn't like that question at all.
I think I'm back. Okay.
You're back. Oh, now we left again. Barry, please stay here. I miss your face when it's not here. So I was saying that a guy asked me more than one, why was I single for so long? And I don't think that's a very helpful question. I didn't like it at all. You're back.
Apologies.
It's okay. So I was saying one of the questions, you probably didn't hear, huh? One of the questions I've been asked more than once that I didn't like is, why have you been single for so long? Such an annoying question. See, I knew you would react that way.
Well, now I don't mind, because I get the question because I get interviewed about being a relationship expert and everything else. It's like, how long you been dating? It's like, well, I've been single for 16 years. And they go, what? I said, yeah, because I'm focused on my work. So I don't get scared by the question.
No.
But I watch why they're asking the question, though.
Yeah.
Because if they're prejudging me because they don't think it's healthy, because I've not been in a relationship for the last 16 years, they might not be the person I want to be with.
No. Well, and first, I find it annoying. And second, I'm like, there's so many other things to ask me before that. Because it's implied what's wrong with me, which is really annoying. And that's not making me want to go out with you again. And then sometimes they'll say with a smile on their face, what's wrong with all the men? I just find it annoying.
Right.
And being interviewed feels different. I will be honest about that, because I've been asked that by interview people. It never upset me, but it upsets me if men across the table ask me. I think it's annoying.
Well, for me, and again, this is just my experience too, is it comes up pretty early on in the conversation about, not having been, because people like, been married before. It comes up a lot because I've never been married. And so that becomes, for some people, immediate deal breaker. And frankly, I'm fine with that because that's what they're attacking. I can walk away. But when it provokes a conversation that goes deeper, then it becomes fascinating. Because the thing is, especially because of the work I do, and because I've written about it and done videos about it and I talk about it all the time, I've had, I mean, I've done it for myself, is found the alignment and the integration of being single and talking about relationships works for me.
Yeah.
And so if I meet somebody and they get that, awesome.
And if they don't, they're probably not your gal.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a good process of elimination for sure.
Well, that's the thing, is that when you're doing these questions, it is meant to be not only, well, I can say this, it isn't necessarily an interview process. However, there is a certain part of it that is going to be eliminating the wheat, separate the wheat from the chaff. So you want to make sure, because the thing is, it's easy to fall in love with anybody in a way, but you want to find someone that really matches the values, qualities, and things you find important to then fall in love with that.
So another thing that I need to ask is, do you have pets and how do you feel about cats? Because there's people that are really allergic, and I have too, as evidence of the one that went zooming by in the beginning.
Indeed.
And I'm not willing to give them up. I want to add to my family, not decrease. Because I did have a guy ask me once, would I be open? And he was very nice about it. He said, would you be available to do that? And I said, no. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the most lovely 5-minute conversation I'd had with anybody. And he did it in such a nice way. I was very impressed. That's just too bad, because he seems to be a really cool guy the way that he did it.
Right.
He was so fine with the answer of whatever I said, which I thought was very nice. But I have to get it out of the way because I live with them all the time and they're not going anywhere. The little one's just a year old. She's going to be around for a while. Today is Sammy's birthday. He turned 16 today, my big old cat.
Happy birthday, Sammy.
Yes. So I always have to find out right away. And it says it in my profiles that I have cats, because there's some people that just, my neighbor is not allergic, but she's afraid of cats. She will not walk in my front door. Isn't that interesting? So I need to tell people I live with cats.
I have to tell a little story then about cats and girlfriends. Because I've had roommates who had cats when I was younger. I used to be very allergic to cats. And even when I had a roommate with cats, I was allergic to them. So I worked through, and the good news was at that time, I worked through stuff that got me basically pretty much 90% healed of that. So I very rarely get allergic to cats now.
Wow.
But I was dating a woman many years ago now, but her cats, she didn't have any, I want to say, dominion over. They were almost, they were indoor cats, but they were big cats, and they didn't like strangers. And she didn't have any buffer or anything to do that with anybody. So anybody she came over to the house, they ran their house more than she did. So literally I remember we went to bed one night and I realized I couldn't get out of bed until she did, because the cats were under the bed and they were swiping with their claws any foot that came down below the edge of the bed.
Oh my God.
So I was a little bit, I wouldn't say I was scared of them, but I was certainly wary of them because they were lethal.
So there's another point. I mean, I have clients that have big dogs that are lovely dogs, but they sleep with them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, there's a woman and a Great Dane. Where is there room for a guy? I mean, You'd have to have such a gargantuan bed. And how's this Great Dane going to feel about this guy sleeping in your bed? I mean, that's something you really first have to think about. But then you have to have a discussion. Do you like dogs? How do you feel about dogs that sleep in the bed? I mean, that's really a very early conversation, because if you really like each other and then there's this deal breaker. Yeah, so pets for sure. Pets for sure.
When I had my dog, she was clear that she had her own bed. She like every time she got on my bed, she's like, "No, get off," and she's like, "Okay, fine."
Oh, good.
So we had a good rapport, because that was the thing. It's like the bed was safe for me and my partner when I had one and when I didn't have one, not for her. She couldn't take up the space, because that was another thing. Because again, little housekeeping thing about having that feng shui idea about relationships. You got to make space for a partner. If that space is filled by a Great Dane in the bed, you may be blocking the energy for creating space for a partner. Just a thought.
Great Dane's almost as big as a person.
In a bed. Bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots bigger. Yeah.
So yes, pets up front is a key thing that you need to have, because definitely if somebody's allergic to or averse to any sort of pet, that's not going to be fun if you have a lot of pets. And if you both don't like pets, great, no problem. Good things to be
And the
clear about.
people who have big families, they like spending time with their families, or the people who don't. And they either go, wow, I've always wanted a family. That's so exciting. Or, oh, no, I like quiet. I just don't like all those big, huge. And neither person's wrong. That's the thing.
Right.
You're just wrong for each other, probably, or at least highly probable. You have to talk about it ahead of time. I dated a guy that he had a brother, but his parents were only children. So their gatherings were these small, quiet things. And he came to my house and he goes, how do you understand each other? We're all talking at the same time. It was, it's just how we are. And I'd grown up with it. It didn't seem weird to me, but it was very weird to him. And he learned to like it okay. But I never thought about preparing somebody ahead of time. So I have sense.
Yes.
Because I'm in the not their thing.
Yeah. No, because I'm in the former boat. I mean, one brother, he's married, one kid. It's like we're a very singular family in that sense. And my parents had like one or two siblings each. So we're not a very big family. So when I go around to families, I remember when I was in a relationship with one woman, went away for Christmas with her family. And there were about, 2 or 3 siblings, and they had 3 or 4 kids each. And it was like a big family gathering. And frankly, it was kind of fun. The challenge for me was like, my thing was like, can you all wear name tags? Because I had to keep track of all the names and faces.
I want colored T-shirts by the family with names on them.
Right.
I know. I have a friend that there's 50 people at their Thanksgiving that are all blood or married. It's like a village. It's crazy. So either you like it or you don't. And maybe you don't know yet. So you try it and you, as you found, oh, it's fun to have all this boisterous noise, but you're happy to go home to your quiet house. Or you think, oh, I just can't. Those introverts. My nephew now has this girlfriend so she just goes out, like we were all in Washington together. There's 9 people in the house, lots of din. Yeah. She goes out on the patio and reads, and nobody thinks anything of it because she just needs her little break. She goes out for half an hour, reads her book, comes back in and is happy to participate, but she just needs her break from us. And because we all understand that, we've talked about it, nobody gets upset because you talked about it.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the biggest keys. Because again, most of us are all different. And so to understand and make that work for you is such a key lesson part of this journey too. So when you do ask questions, is learning what somebody's about, what their framework is, how they interact with the world. And not necessarily it's the same as yours, but does it work with you that you can work with that? Because that's the thing about asking the questions. If you really to navigate how you relate to each other, do you find yourself finding that not only is it just chemistry, but it's also, I like what this person's about, what their values are, what they want to do, how they interact. Oh, that's different, but I can work with that.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about now, all stuff we talked about so far on the show, we're giving you specifics and more overarching themes. I hope that people, if you're watching this, that you're getting the values of the questions you ask and the question not to ask are really directional towards this understanding. You get to know somebody's being and how they interact so that you feel like you can fit with that or not. That's really what it's about. The first date, in a lot of ways, is enjoyment and research.
Yeah. And what we've always said is with every first meeting with somebody, what are you going to continue learning about yourself? Are you comfortable talking about this? What do you need to feel comfortable talking about? Asking this question, answering the question. And then what did you learn about the other person? And did it intrigue you enough to want to see them again? Because obviously this person that you met recently, you're very intrigued to see her again because the conversation just kept blossoming and flowing. And I think the more you think about expansive questions, not closed-ended, not too personal right out of the gate. Right. Because we're very happy to reveal. I like it when people kind of take it a couple steps at a time, though. They don't just ask right off the bat. Warm me up a little like a crock pot. I need a little warming up.
There's a theory. First date crock pot. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, not a microwave on the first date. I want a little.
No. Yeah. Hopefully, giving you some things to think about and some things not to ask.
And if you want to find out more about questions to ask and not ask. And you can certainly share all your questions you've been asked that you didn't like, or questions you wish people would ask you. Write them to us. We would love that. We would love to hear more about what your thoughts about this. And if you want to get some personal help, you can contact either Barry or I. And the way that you get a hold of me is through my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. And you can fill out what's holding you back from love. And that will give you a link to my calendar, and you can set up a personal complimentary conversation with me. You can also send me an email at Christine@theperfectcatch, and you can watch my videos, my personal ones, as well as my ones with Barry on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Instagram and Twitter.
There you go. Here's the list.
I'm getting better at this every time.
Good stuff.
And tell them how to get a hold of you, Barry.
Of course. So same as Christine, I have a website and social media. So my website is my name, which is barryselby.com. And on the homepage of that, you can click on the top link, which is to get started and find out more about how to work together, which is a discovery session you can have with me. Or if you want to go to the bottom of the screen on the front page, you can also join my email list right there, where you do get notifications of what's coming up for me, including replays of this show, which I send out to my email list. If you want to email me, it's barry@barryselby.com. And on my social media is my name, except for Instagram. So it's Barry Selby on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, and on Clubhouse and TikTok. On Instagram, it's the real Barry Selby. YouTube as well. Sorry, YouTube is also Barry Selby. There's 1,500 videos up there, so you can subscribe to my channel and get lots of stuff to watch there. Mm-hmm. And that's all the platforms. Yeah, and Instagram is the real Barry Selby. It's the only one that's different. And what we talked about here, hopefully, is giving you stuff to think about. And definitely, if you have questions, reach out to one of us.
Yes,
or both of us.
Yes. And share this video with anybody that you think might be having a challenge in their dating because of this reason or other reasons. We'd be happy to have a conversation with them as well. And we'll be back again next week with Let's Talk About Dating at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern, and all the times in between, with another scintillating, energizing, educational subject.
Exactly. See you then.
Yes. Bye for now.
Bye.